Welcome to Two Humans Talking, the podcast where we talk about what it's really like to be healthy in this modern, fast paced world. I'm Tiffany Simms, your burnout recovery coach and holistic wellness coach. And today I am so excited to bring to you this gift, this light, this ball of energy and beauty, Demarra West. Demarra, thank you for being here. If you don't mind, share with people who you are, where you're from, like what makes you you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tiffany, I just want to start with gratitude. Thank you so much for having me be a part of your platform and speak to your audience. This is sacred work that you're doing, and I'm really, really grateful to be a part of it. So I have been a therapist since 2010 and really started off on my pathway to become a therapist because I had a childhood riddled with trauma and knew that I was really being driven to support the world in a lot of different ways. And so, I was a school-based, home-based therapist for a while, worked in the substance abuse realm. And in tandem with that, I was an entrepreneur and I had a consulting business. And I kind of lived in two worlds as an organizational development consultant and then as a therapist. And really feeling far removed from my trauma, right? Knowing again that my drive to become a therapist was really connected to my experiences, but I didn't really realize that I had a lot of my own healing to do. And that
Mm.
awakening came about 4 or 5 years ago when I started Be Well Beautiful Woman, which is a global wellness community that is all about accessible healing practices, really helping people to understand the power that they have to co-create healing in their lives and doing so through accessible mediums like energy work that you can utilize on yourself or meditation or yoga, um, education that's accessible like through wellness. And so as I find myself gravitating towards this formalized training to be a yoga teacher and a Reiki master, I found out that I too was really being called to cultivate something within myself that I didn't know that I needed to even cultivate.
I love that.
And that actually led me to write my first book called Me Too, A Therapist's Journey to Heal, Find Liberation and Joy. And now my work is really centered all around wellness and liberation. And I'm, moving out of the business world into this organizational wellness, individual wellness, and all things related to trauma-informed practice, and helping individuals to decide for themselves what they want in their lives and to give them accessible resources to curate that on a mind, body, and spirit level.
Oh, that's so good. There is such a theme throughout like a lot of the podcasts. So like when you have a podcast, you get a lot of entrepreneurs and coaches, especially in this realm. And I always sometimes like I worry that like the woman who's listening, she's like she disconnects a little bit because she's like, well, I'm not an entrepreneur. I work 50 hours a week and I got a family and this, that, and the other. And I love what you just said because I thought it was so real. And that was that like through all of this work, you learn that there was something more for you outside of the messiness and like this
Mhm.
calling. And for whatever reason, it clicked in today. Like the calling doesn't have to be, I'm going to go start a business or start an organization, but it's like getting into that alignment of like how you show up in even in your own family or how
Yeah.
you're now going to show up in your own workplace as this new person who's more aligned and centered and is approaching problems from a healed place rather than from a wounded, defensive, let's just get it done place. And I
Yeah.
think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, and I just to follow up with what you just said, I think it's so keen that you're tuning into the journey, right? So no one could have told me 5 years ago that I was going to start Be Well Beautiful Woman. No one could have even told me that I was going to start my business 15 years ago and go into the consulting realm. I didn't know
Right?
anyone who was an entrepreneur, but I knew that um there was this itch to do something different, and this is where if we can really understand that no matter who we are and what we came from, whether that be trauma or poverty, whatever hardship, being a woman, being a person of color, there are a lot of things that are working against us in the world, right? If we allow it to. And yet, if we can really trust the journey, if we can pay attention to the myriad of ways that universe, God, creator, source is speaking to us, and have the courage to say yes, even though we don't know why we're getting that itch to do something different. And sometimes it's glaring and we know, oh my gosh, like my life is out of control and I need more work-life balance and I'm not well and my body is starting to reject the rigor of my life, right? So
Mhm.
many women fall in that category. And that becomes even more true for trauma
And
survivors.
then they convince themselves that it's all them and that they just need to like deal with it and get over it. And it's like, no, those are all the signals that something's not quite right. And a
Yeah.
small little tweak, a small little piece of intention and mood, doing something a little different can make all the difference.
Yes, yes, you nailed it, right? And I think that's in part like where we're aligned, this idea that wellness doesn't have to be these grand gestures. Wellness can be about the day to day, it's really about the day to day ways that we're cultivating our well being,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because that's the only pathway by which we can have a sustainable, right, life rooted in
It's
well-being in
so
every
true.
single way possible.
It's
So,
so true. So like I'm gonna like the analogy I'll use is in the weight loss world because that's my world. And
mhm,
it's like so many women, they're like, they blame themselves that they were bad, they suck, they just can't stick to anything. And it's like, if what you're doing, you can't do every day for the rest of your life effortlessly, quote unquote, effortlessly, then that's not the way to achieve the goal you're after. So like
yeah,
the way you lose weight is the way you maintain weight. And so I love that you said it's like the day in and day out things, not just the things that you're doing for those little micro sprints that
mhm,
make all the difference. It
yeah.
really is the habits throughout the day. And are they in alignment with who you want to be and the way you want to feel?
Yeah, and you nailed it, right? Like that is the impotence of co-creation. We can dream of all day long how we want our lives to be different, how we want to physically look different, how we want to have more energy, how we want to align with our purpose. But if our action isn't congruent with that, then we're going to be hard pressed to get it. And then the opposite, of course, is what you just named as well, that, many times we're suffering our way through to try to get to this goal, right? We have these two extremes. And that is not also not sustainable because the energy by which that we have to struggle to maintain a certain goal, let's say it's weight, um, this is why many people end up losing and gaining and losing and gaining in this constant pattern. And then if we
Hmm.
connect it to trauma, right, there is a correlation with being overweight and having trauma, particularly around sexual assault, because there's a lot of ways that we will show up in the world to protect ourselves, and weight is one of them, right? If
Yes.
I were only Black, I'm only going to get so much attention if I were only Black. If I have so much weight on my body, I'm only going to be able to get so much attention from that point. There isn't a conscious thing around that. And it's connected to also how food can provide comfort and how we're
True.
going to search for comfort in any way that we can find it, right?
Oh my
Any
God, I
way
love
that
this
we
so
can be
much.
accepted. So, when we talk about what it means to be well and really facing ourselves in the midst of the cultivation of well being, I think it's also important to acknowledge that we don't have to like suffer our way through it. And, many people, there's countless stories, even just about what you said, like setting this intention, visualizing yourself as being what you want to be in this vision of well being, whether that be strong or, for vanity reasons. It doesn't matter what the reasons are, right? As long as we can embody them and we know the why behind it, even that alone is going to give us the strength that we need to begin to make more mindful decisions around movement and around eating that allows us to get to that goal with ease and allows us to become a part of just like who we are and how we show
Yes.
up in the world.
And you don't have to force it as much. Like, yes,
Yeah.
and there's a difference. Like, there's such a difference between forceful discomfort, like forceful, icky, you shouldn't be doing it, and then just uncomfortable because you're doing something that you haven't done before or at an intensity you haven't done before. Like,
Yeah.
it's subtle, but there is such a difference from showing up for those tasks and those actions from a place of like I have to's, or I should be doing this, or I need to be doing this, to showing up within those spaces with I'm doing these things even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's hard, because this is where I'm going. And that like subtle little shift makes all the difference in the energy you bring to those
Mm.
activities.
This is so true, right? And if we're talking about it, like in the context of money, let's say, this is why the whole notion of giving with a joyful heart is so important. Because even though the act of giving and supporting someone financially or through our labor or whatever that might be is a good thing, if our energy doesn't correlate with the act of goodness, with the act of love, then it's not going to feel as good to engage in that act. It's not going to land as well to engage in that act. And we are actually cutting off our energetic flow, right?
Yes.
We're acting hastily in the midst of the giving. So, no matter what we do in life, the intention, the energy by which we align with it, that actually helps to create the flow, right? And so I just love what you're saying, because no matter what it is that we want to do in life, the school of thought, right, is that we have to suffer our way towards change, right? We have to rigor our way. We have to work out so much. We have to, be on this disciplined diet. We have to, and, but do we? Like, does it actually have to be that hard? And if we knew that there was a better way, a more optimal way for us to ground ourselves into well-being, why wouldn't we do it? Like,
Yeah.
if we can do this the easy way, why would we take the hard way?
Well, and sometimes the easy way is just that it's in alignment with where you're going and your intentions are good. Because let's be real, like building a business, building the body of your dreams, like being the best parent, partner, spouse, friend, whatever it is, sometimes that is hard and there's nothing wrong with it being hard. But if it's heavy and hard, that's different. Hard
Yeah.
and empowered and like you know where you're going through the hard is very different than that hard and heavy. Heavy
Mm.
means like we are pushing the wrong rock up the wrong mountain and we just need to take a step back, at least from my experience.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a really good point, and it's knowing that at times, right, life is gonna life, and there's gonna be times of harvest,
It's the only thing that's
right?
consistent. Life
Yes,
is going to
life
be
is
hard. It's going to have life. Like
it,
hard things are going to happen, shitty things are going to
yeah,
happen. That's the consistent. But how you handle
exactly. Yeah. But if we can, like, as lives, if we are able to not resist the way that life is showing up, and we can flow with it, and we can ask ourselves, okay, what is happening right now, or understand this is a temporary season of harvest, right? Because I'm laying the foundation for my
that,
work. And, when I think about where we're at in, this season of getting the book out there, it's rigor. Like, there is not, I want to be really clear, right? But even in the midst of rigor, there's time for play, there's time for curiosity, there's time for rest, right? So if all I'm doing is rigor and I'm not leaving any room to do anything else, or I'm not amplifying my practice during the times of rigor, then I'm going to suffer through that. So,
yeah,
part of this is about planning for what we need
I was just about to
seasonally,
ask you that.
right? Like,
Hmm.
what do we need in this season to be well, knowing that this is going to be a laborious time, right? Knowing that my child is in their last year of high school, knowing that my child is really struggling with their mental health right now, knowing that I'm struggling with my mental health. Knowing that these things are coming up, triggers related to my past, and I've got to face these. Like, when we're facing dark parts of ourselves, that's not easy to do. Now, when we get to the light, it makes it worth it, right? When we rise in the midst of facing that darkness, it makes it worth it. So I appreciate what you're saying. Like, let's not, send the message that there's not going to be times in where life is going to be difficult, because it will be. But the key is that we allow ourselves to experience the fullness of what it means to be in that, is that we find the gratitude associated with it, with what that means. We find the purpose, and so that then we can rise out of it, because we're not meant to stay in emotions that make us feel icky. We're actually meant to be in those high level emotions, but we have to do the work, right? So that we don't get stuck in negative emotions. And we allow emotions to do what they're designed to do, which because we're all energy, right? And emotions are energy in motion. So when I get angry, right, my job is to understand where that anger is coming from. What is this anger teaching me? And then choosing whatever I need to choose to start feeling better, right?
Yes. Ladies, are you listening to Demarra right now? Like, I need you to go rewind like 60 seconds and listen to that again with the intention and the focus behind it, because what you just shared is the unlock that so many, especially women, are missing because we're not taught how to do that. And we're broadcasted that, like, flow and ease, and like it's never supposed to feel a certain way. And it's like, that's not necessarily true. And you're also saying, like, you know what, if this is the season of hustle for you because you have clear goals and these are the intentions and this is the time to push, that push should only be a season. It's not supposed to be forever. It's not supposed to last a lifetime. And at the same time, you need to be intentional about scheduling in the time for play and connection and things so that it's a part of the machine that you're running. I love
Mhm.
that so much.
I Yeah, and I love how you described it, and the practicality of what you just rolled out. And one thing that I just want to add to this conversation about like how we can buffer in general in life, but particularly during those rigorous times. I do this talk called "People Are Our Number One Pathway to Prosperity," right? So one of the most potent vehicles that we can use to support us in our journey is by asking for support from others, by really centering the cultivation of relationships, having the courage to put ourselves out there and ask for people to be a support, and then allow people to show up and magically support us in all the ways that they're intending to. And it's funny, this week I had a meeting with a client of mine, and we were just doing a check-in, hey, how you doing? This is what's going on in my world, what's going on in your world, because it's not a transactional relationship for me, even though this is a client that has paid me to do work, right? It's investing in relationships yields us so much. We don't network for the sake of networking. We network for the sake of building deep relationships and cultivating those relationships to support us on our journeys, because people do want to support us. They're waiting for us to ask them, right? People don't just typically write a check. They have to be asked to write that check to support
They have
that
to see the
particular
vision
cause.
sometimes too. They have to understand sometimes
Yeah.
what you're
Abs-
asking and
oh my
how that
God.
impacts them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, the other day I said to this client, she said, well, I just want to share, this, all of everything that you're doing with everybody that I know. What can I do for you? And I said, like, I really appreciate you saying that, and I want you to know that source already knows what I want. I've already asked for what I want. God knows what my vision is for my life. Universe knows exactly. And if you're a part of that, then what I know to be true is that both we're going to discover exactly what that is, and we're going to align on that. Now, sometimes there is that specific ask, right? That you talked about, but sometimes it's just organic, right? And that's where, Pam Grout talks about, like, we can certainly ask, but the real magic of abundance comes when we just know what it is that we want. We see ourselves, we're having those practices at the forefront, and then we just allow things to just unfold the way they're going to unfold in perfect alignment with
I
what
love
it is
that.
that we want for our life.
I'm so in alignment with you. Alignment and alignment. Like, how many times can we say alignment today? Um, I'm right there with you. And something that I know to be true, and here's a practical tidbit for you listening, is like, when I ask someone for help or lean in, because I am really big on when things are messy and things are hard, leaning in instead of out, because I know that every time I isolate myself, it leads me down a bad path. My mental health suffers, my physical body suffers, like I get overwhelmed, I start to get anxious. So I lean in. But when I lean in, I have also grown to know awareness enough to ask the people I'm leaning into if they are actually able to support me in the season that they're in too. and like giving them that grace to be like, I love you and I am here for you. I actually can't give you what you need right now. And I
Yeah.
think that that's just as much love as someone, even more love than the person who will sacrifice themselves to like pick up whatever you need, because that's not serving. That's not good energy. Now you're burdening. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
ask them like, hey, I could really use help with X, Y, and Z. Is that something you'd be able to support me in right now? And
Mm.
giving that leeway. What's something that you do when you lean into asking someone for setting?
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. And it's actually, it reminds me of just the way that we check in with people, and I love this question around like, how is your heart? Right. And what that does is it's really giving people space for their full humanity to show up. Right. And so that practice that you just talked about is very much in alignment with that practice. And so, the way that I approach it is that, I ask, and if people can't, I don't take it personal. And
Mm-hmm.
so, the four agreements, one of the, practices that we can use that makes life easier is to know that nothing that anybody else does is about us. And it can feel like it's about us. And I'm reminded time and time again that even when I see something played out and I tell myself a story about that, that story that I've told myself might not actually be accurate, right, about this person. So not making assumptions goes hand in hand with that, essentially. And so what I believe is this, that the harvest that I planted around how I support the world, that the world is going to show up and support me, and the right people are going to say yes at the right time. So the way that I approach it is, I'll give you an example. I'm getting ready to leave the area for the very first time. Lived here my whole life, but traveled across the globe. And this is the place that I've always called home, but I'm in this space of moving into a new chapter. And so Source said to me, my intuition said to me, go to LinkedIn and see how many contacts you have in this particular area that you're moving to. And I had like 600 contacts. And I messaged every single one of them, cut and paste, really short message. How's life? How you doing? Getting ready to relocate to the area. I'm looking to build my personal and professional connections. And the love that I have received from just sending this message, all it did was take me my time and the courage to put myself out there.
Oh, so good.
And so many people have said, yes, I want to help you. Here are resources. Let's sit down. I want to bring you in. I want you to meet X, Y, and Z. I want to host an event for you because everybody needs to know about you. That is the magic,
Energy that you're putting out in the world too. Like that's coming right back at you.
because that's what creates flow. So when we can choose love, when we are giving, when we choose peace above conflict, when we are doing our work, then we can't help to be supported, right? So I don't, that's the difference though, is that I don't feel entitled. I just know the support is coming. I don't know who it's coming from. I don't know in what fashion it's going to show up, but it's going to come. And it comes
Mm-hmm.
time. This week I could give you 20 examples of how that manifested in my life this week alone. And the week is not even over yet. Now, part of that is that whatever we focus on is what expands. And I'm doing the prosperity plan in the abundance book for the fourth time. And this time I said, I'm not going to do just 40 days. I'm going to keep doing these practices every day until I decide that my work is done right now in this regard. So, because I'm doing the work, and not just the work external, I'm doing the work internal, and I'm
Yes.
trusting that I'm being taken care of. And so what is going to happen? Like, I'm going to be taken care of everywhere. It doesn't mean that life is always going to be easy. And it doesn't mean that I haven't had some challenges that I've had to face this week either.
Right. And that's a really hard concept. I'm sure this comes up for you a lot with your clients. When you've suffered a trauma, when life has been hard and unkind to you from whatever circumstances you got thrown into at a young age or unknowingly in a moment in adulthood, like that's it takes a lot of work. Because I could remember, if you rewind me 20 years, there would have been a time where I would not have even been able to get this far in this conversation because I've been like, you don't get it. And the reality is that as you explore and as you unpack some of your own baggage and start to like throw it in the dumpster, leave it behind, give it back to the people it belonged to. Like you realize that there's this like freedom, and you're no longer, as you said, you're no longer upset when people say no thank you or they don't show up for you, because it can be a sign that one, okay, they must be busy. Or two, like this keeps happening and this is a one-way street. This relationship's no longer serving me. I don't need to address it. I'm just going to remove myself. And
Yes.
that learning about boundaries for myself from a, when I first started boundaries, it was like a force. Like these are my boundaries, you must follow them. And the more I healed and started showing up the way that I wanted the world to be and the world to treat me, the more I realized that some of those conversations were more of not me needing to tell someone, but showing them how they can treat me, and then being the person that just removes themselves from
Mm,
situations, rather than like, it's not up to you to hold my boundaries. It's my job to hold my boundaries. And that means sometimes removing myself or not sharing certain things with you, or, and not from that place of icky, but from that place of like, this is my piece. And I
yeah.
get to choose where you belong in my world at this point based on how you show up. And so if you're in the suck right now and you're like, sounds nice, Demarra and Tiffany, but like you don't get it, I just encourage you to just find out where those, explore those places where you have that resistance and that heaviness, and explore what's not working for you. And then decide how you're going to show up differently in those interactions next time. And maybe it is just walking away. Maybe it is saying, like, hey, you can't talk to me like that. I'm not going to do that anymore. And then like actually meaning it, not just word vomiting over and over again.
Mm. You
And
said,
then like, oh, go ahead.
no, you said a word. You said a word. And I love this call to action, right? Because, um, and, and the reality is that even though we have individualized experiences, all of us, um, we do get it. I think we both understand what it means to be a lesser version of who we are. I
Mm,
think both of us understand what it means to want to speak and not have the words. I think both of us understand times when we felt that we've been on an island and there's no one who understands us, because that's what the narrative that trauma creates. I think we both understand shame and how it manifests in our lives. And so the invitation for anyone who's listening is to really, and there's no judgment about wherever we are in this journey. There is absolutely no judgment. But if you are not living your life as fully as you'd like to, if you don't have the relationship with money that you would like to, if your relationships are not as rich, if you find yourself spending time alone much of the time in isolation, if you find yourself not saying yes to life and living life and having the courage to live life, because we're not just afraid to die, we are afraid to live. And trauma will keep us, and the fear associated with how trauma manifests in our body that will oftentimes hijack us from living the way that we want to and have us in patterns that we don't want to be into, but we don't know how to get out of. There's a blueprint. There's a blueprint. And every practice that we're talking about today are practices that we have both utilized in our own lives to help us to rise. And countless people across the globe have used them. They're research based. And even though Albert Einstein said that everything that we measure is not meaningful, and everything that's meaningful we can't measure, the beautiful thing is that all holistic practices, energy work, we have tons of research to back up the efficacy in helping to people rise. And they're not just good, they're good for all of us, but they're particularly good for trauma survivors to reclaim our power, to integrate back in our body, to be able to regulate our emotions so that we can be
that
well
a concept.
and engage, right? And we can engage in the world in the ways that we are meant to, the beauty, the richness, and not fold in the mist. And so depression is a mist of folding. Rage is a mist of folding, right? And none of those extremities will help us to find the connection within ourselves and the connection with the world that we are intended to have. So when people say things like this to me, Tiffany, I'll say this last before I turn it over to you. I can't remember the last time I cried. You need some healing. I'm not in touch with my emotions. I can't talk about my emotions, right? Um, I don't like touch. I'm not willing to deal with conflict. I'm conflict averse. These are all indications that we have had some experiences that are preventing us from living our lives as fully as possible, because that's a lie. Our birthright is connected to, we are meant as humans to be in connection with other humans. Our evolution, our ability to live life fully. So if we can relate to any of this, and if we find ourselves in isolation and we feel like we can't trust anybody and nobody understands us, this message is for you.
It is for you.
Message is for you.
And know that sometimes it gets a little, I I'm gonna say it because it's real, and this is the shit we need to talk about.
Come
Is
on.
when you choose a different life for yourself. Oh, I'm choking up. It does get lonely for a minute
Mm,
because you are becoming someone that is no longer attractive to the people that were using and abusing and taking you for granted, and you're not quite yet energetic enough for the people who you want to be like and want to surround yourself with. So, in that limbo area, as you are growing and you are becoming this new version of yourself, it does get a little lonely, but just know that it is so worth it. It is so worth the next, like the next town on that road trip when you're trying to find the next gas station. Like that next pit stop is worth you traveling alone to really unpack that inner dark work so that you can show up your most vibrant, energetic self for that next season of life.
mm,
Because that's how, you and I wouldn't be on this podcast right now if we didn't do that. If we didn't travel the path and leave some of the old shit behind and to become this new person, we would have never been in the circles where we would have come together to have a podcast episode on this topic. And so
mm.
just trust that you're going in the right direction and trust that there are people waiting for you to show up as this new evolved version of yourself. Mm.
Yeah. I love that you just allowed yourself to go there, because that is the reality. And I talk about this in my book, this awakening that I had about 5 years ago. And I left, a 15-year marriage. It was, that was a good marriage, but it wasn't aligned anymore. Right. And I couldn't be in it anymore and do the work that I needed to do, that I didn't know that I needed to do. And it was unfortunate, right? Because that meant um, suffering for me. It meant suffering for the people that I love. And it meant isolation for a long time. And I talk about, like leaving and living in isolation for several months, right? Functioning, barely functioning, right? Doing the things that I needed to do,
The comfortable, uncomfortable.
right? Like doing the things that I needed to do, showing up, um, but barely showing up with a lot of solitude on my hands, showing up with a lot of time like alone and doing my work. And that was one of the darkest periods in my life, you know? And me too. Like this is I was a therapist. I was a trained therapist. I was starting to be trained in all these holistic modalities. I believed in healing at that time. And yet, because I hadn't done my work, because I didn't think I needed to do my work, because that was my past. And I was convinced that, oh, I'm a mother and I'm a wife and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm active in my community. And all of that was, and I'm healing people. All of that was true. All of that was true. And so I just appreciate you acknowledging again that as we do this work, as we face ourselves in that darkness and we rise into our our birthright, right? Who we really are,
Mm.
um, then and be able to have the vibration that brings in the goodness associated with who we really are, because we can't attract who we really are until we heal, right? We're going to have imbalance, right? We can't have aligned relationships. People can't love us for the most part. People can't love us more than what we love ourselves.
Jamie Kern Lima, she was the founder of It Cosmetics, sold it to L'Oreal, the company to L'Oreal for like a billion some dollars. She is such an incredible person. She's like one of those people that you just want to be best friends with. I'm not sure if you know her, but she says,
No, I don't, but I want to.
oh, you need to.
Yeah.
Her book, Believe It, is really good. And she's coming out with a new book this month called Worthy. But she's like the person that you're just want to sit in your PJs on the couch with some hot chocolate and just like be friends with. But
Yeah.
she says, not everyone is assigned to your destination.
Mm.
And, sometimes you have to be okay leaving the people who don't want to grow with you behind throughout the different seasons of your life, because not everyone is assigned to your destination, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard her say that, I was like, I don't get it. Like, what do you mean not everyone's assigned to my destination? Like, why don't they want to grow with me? Why am I not enough that they want to be better and support me and to do all these things? Me, right? And then one day it clicked in and it's like, oh, they can't see my value. One, they can't see my value because they're not assigned to my destination and they're not coming on this journey with me. They're not meant to. Or
Yes.
two, my worthiness is not tied to whether or not they want to grow as a person and
Mhm.
evolve and change and be able to be the person that I need in my life. That doesn't make anything wrong with me. It doesn't make me wrong or bad or selfish. It just means that thank you for the times that we were together in the season that I needed you and you needed me. And it's okay to bless and release.
Mm.
And when you're coming through that trauma work and you're going on that personal growth development journey and you're really learning how to be holistically healthy, not just a size or a shape or cholesterol,
Mm.
like all of those pieces come together in such a magical way. And so I want that for you listening right now. It's okay if it's hard right now. It was hard for us too. And every time you decide to grow, up until the moment you decide, I am just going to stay here and ride it out, it's just going to come on a cycle. But the difference is that you're aware now. You're like, oh, this resistance, that means I'm about to break through something really big. It no longer like has that heaviness of like, what is wrong with me? Why am I so lonely? Why doesn't anyone love me? Like, why am I not enough? It's
Yeah.
just like, oh, okay. And so you can recognize it faster and cycle through a lot faster.
Mm. Yeah, I really appreciate how you're normalizing that as we do our work, we evolve. And as we evolve, our relationships, our surroundings begin to evolve. There's food that I used to crave that I don't crave anymore. There's people that I just had to have in my life that are not here anymore. There are things that I used to feel were important that are no longer important to me anymore. And even though, and you said it, like, of course, we want everybody to get this wellness. We want everybody to get this money. We want everybody to be right, to be whatever they want physically, right? Like all of that, whatever you deem abundance is, however you want to live your life. But the reality is that, and I learned this a long time ago when I first became a therapist. One day I had this epiphany and I'm like, why am I working so hard? Right? Like, why am I working harder than my clients? Like, and it wasn't helping them to heal. Like, it wasn't helping them to move. And my mantra this year is actually, I'm not doing anything for anybody that they can do for themselves. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to feel called. Listen, Tiffany.
Ah,
Okay. Should I say that again, Tiffany?
do
Should
it
I
again.
just,
Do it one more time.
okay. I am not. And hopefully I'm inspiring all of us. We are not doing anything that other people can do for themselves. Doesn't mean that we're not sharing resources. Doesn't mean that we don't feel inclined to write that check, to be supportive. Doesn't mean that we don't mentor other people. I'm not talking about the nature of how we're being called to share our light. I'm talking about enabling people who are fully capable of doing the work for themselves. Because when we operate in the realm of doing for others what they can do for themselves, we are actually harming ourselves in some ways, and we are also harming them because we are not giving them the ability to do what they can do for themselves as a foundation for them to build on to transform their own lives, right?
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
so I love the
What a gift you're giving people. They may not see it. So
I
make
hope
sure
they
not to
do.
take your gift.
Some folks gonna
Hold
see
it,
it,
yeah.
Tiffany. Some folks
Hold
gonna
it, yeah.
see it.
Because if I can learn, if I can learn a new skill, grow in a different way, see things in a new way, and enable my own self, I am so much more powerful on the things that I am trying to accomplish.
And from that point, that is ultimately what changes people. So even when my clients come to me and say, oh my God, Demarra, you did X, Y, and Z for me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that my light was able to be utilized to support you, but remember that you did the work. I did what I was supposed to do. But if all I do is what I'm supposed to do and you don't do what you're supposed to do, guess what? You're going to be exactly where you are right now in this moment. That's
Yeah,
how life works.
that's how it
If you
works.
want to change it, you have to change it. We can't dream our way towards change. We have to activate in concert with the dream and the vision, and in concert with the belief that we're being taken care of, right?
Oh,
And in
that's so good.
concert with loving detached, because loving detached allows us to be willing to let go anything that is preventing us from going to the next level. And that's people, that's places, and that's things.
Girl, I'm
We
gonna have to replay this when it drops. Like, this is so, so, so good. And you're so right. And also, before we wrap this up, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, like, can we just compliment how fire she looks? Like, look at her radiate in her pink coat, her pink lipstick, the pretty earrings, her shiny nose ring. Like, you just you're radiating. Like you can tell a person who's living the way that they're talking versus someone who's just talking a bunch of shit.
Yes.
And you are clearly living and embodying what you practice, like preach and practice. And I just wanted to pause and give that back to you because you deserve it. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here.
Oh
How do
my God.
people connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So folks can find me at demarrawest.com. That's where the book and all things centered around the book is. Be Well Beautiful Woman can be found at bewellbeautifulwoman.com. And then we're on Instagram at the letter Be Well Beautiful. So I'm going to be launching Be Well Beautiful People soon. That's coming down the pipeline. But we will still have Be Well Beautiful Woman. They're going to be sister and brother in terms of how we approach that work. So yeah, looking forward to just being in touch and being supportive of any of your listeners, any of my listeners that are also tuning in as well. And I'm here for it. And I'm so grateful for you and the work that you have clearly done on yourself and just showing up with your authenticity. I think, when we can recognize the light in other people, that means that we've got some light within ourselves, right? And I just love that you just went there. I love whenever I hear people cursing, I'm like, ooh, this is somebody who's authentic.
Sometimes it's just there, right?
you know, listen, I'm like, if you hear one of my talks, you're probably going to hear at least one choice word, because that's just a part of me keeping it real, right? And not saying that cursing is the only indication, but it is definitely one of the indications for me. Yeah, somebody is keeping it real, honey.
That's what we're here for. So, with that, thank you, Demarra, so much. And with that, everyone, Two Humans Talking. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.